Hi friend, today I'm going to talk about processed food, how alluring it can be and the health effects that it can lead to. I'm also going to introduce you to two simple, common sense, split-second tests that you can run just in a moment in the back of your mind to decide what level of processing of the food that you choose to eat you're comfortable with. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video for those, because they're really simple, really intuitive, and once you've heard them, you'll easily remember them when you're walking around the grocery store trying to decide what you want to eat. Let's dive in, friend. I'm Dr. Ryan Williams, your host and the founder of Growing Pure, where I help you make vegan cooking and health fast, simple, and mind-blowingly tasty. Picture this. Sarah is a dedicated and loving mother to two energetic, happy kids, Emma and Jack. Her days are filled with a never-ending list of responsibilities, from managing a demanding job to shuttling her kids around to different sports and activities, helping them with their homework. It seems like there's never enough time in the day, and stress is her constant companion. One particularly hectic evening, Sarah finds herself rushing home from work, her mind a whirlwind of deadlines and unfinished tasks. As she sits in traffic, she can't help but feel a little bit guilty that she doesn't often have the time or motivation to cook meals for her family as much as she'd like to. It just feels like an unattainable luxury. Her mind snaps to the ready meals she picked up from the store on Saturday, currently sitting in the refrigerator, waiting to be used for dinner this evening. She recalls picking them up in the store. The packaging was bright and colourful and exciting looking. It talked about how the calories in the meal were really low and there was definitely some vitamin or other in there. And of course the alluring promise of how quick and easy and convenient it would be to make dinner for her family. Her feeling of guilt intensifies. She'd love to spend more time cooking, but it's just not a priority right now. Not when the mortgage is going up next month and her husband got passed over for a promotion, and Emma's school report said that she needs to do more reading at home to see her English scores improve. As Sarah arrives home, her children greet her with hugs and excitement, totally unaware of the thoughts going through Sarah's mind and how busy her day's been. Sarah brushes off the nagging doubts about family meals and reassures herself that one of these days she's going to get through her to-do list and she's going to have much more time to cook fresh meals for her family. She pops the ready meals into the microwave and the smell of processed cheese and artificial flavours fills the air. Sarah serves the meals and sits down with her kids at the dining table like usual, like she did yesterday and the day before. There's no doubting that this meal was super convenient for someone as busy as Sarah was. And the kids enjoyed it, and even Sarah couldn't deny that it did taste really good. That evening, Sarah even had a little bit of time to help Emma with her reading homework before wrapping up a few work emails. And friend, so the pattern continues for Sarah and for millions of others just like her. Her story certainly feels kind of familiar to me. So what I'm about to share is meant to help Sarah understand the consequences of those daily food decisions and bring that far out event into the present so that we can examine it now. So the truth is that ultra-processed food is responsible for serious adverse health outcomes. For instance, a study published in the British Medical Journal looked at 100,000 French adults over a 5-year period. The researchers found that those people who consume more ultra-processed foods faced a higher risk of life-threatening health conditions, things like cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, and cerebrovascular disease, brain diseases like dementia and strokes. And what was really interesting is that these results remained statistically significant even after the researchers adjusted for the levels of fat, salt, sugar, and fibre in the diets of different people. So this points towards ultra-processed foods being particularly damaging to our health beyond just the fat, sugar, and salt in them. There's another study of nearly 20,000 Spanish adults, and the results that they found were striking. I'm going to quote directly from the paper. The researchers found that a higher consumption of ultra-processed foods meaning greater than 4 servings daily, was independently associated with a 62% relatively increased hazard for all-cause mortality. For each additional serving of ultra-processed food, all-cause mortality increased by 18%. So what this means is that for every extra daily portion of ultra-processed food that someone ate, their chances of dying from any cause went up by 18%. If you ask me, that is a seriously scary result. And what's more, a sizable and ever-growing body of research has associated ultra-processed foods with health conditions like obesity, type 2 diabetes, depression, and cardiovascular disease. Now, it is true that large observational studies like this don't prove cause and effect. So it could be a coincidence, or it could be some other way around. Perhaps people that are already sick are eating more ultra-processed foods. But to me, it seems like there's an awful lot of smoke for there not to be a fire after all. My approach is, why take the chance with your health, probably the most important thing you possess? I think it's perhaps safest to assume, until proven otherwise, that ultra-processed foods are dangerous for our health. So I've thrown around this term ultra-processed food quite a lot. So it's worth asking the question, what exactly does that mean, and what is processing? So the Harvard School of Public Health says that highly processed or ultra-processed foods tend to have many additional ingredients added, things like fat, salt, sugar, and artificial colours and preservatives. And these ultra-processed foods are generally made up of substances extracted from foods rather than the whole foods themselves. So we're thinking of things like fats, sugars, starches, hydrogenated fats. These are all things that aren't found on their own in nature. They all come as part of something else. Essentially, if a food you buy has more than 5 or so ingredients, and some or most of those ingredients are things that you wouldn't tend to find in a normal home kitchen, it's probably an ultra-processed food. Good examples of these ultra-processed foods are things like soft drinks, hot dogs, salami, bacon, sliced deli meats, fast food, ready meals, packaged cookies and cakes and biscuits, salty packaged snacks like potato chips. All these would qualify as ultra-processed foods. So I would suggest that if we want to live the healthiest life we can, we really want to minimize the amount of these ultra-processed foods that we're eating. I think avoiding them entirely is possible, but it's very, very difficult when we live in the 21st century. But minimizing them is definitely possible. But it's actually important not to demonize all kinds of processing, because they're not all bad for you. Some foods might be minimally processed by doing things like taking out inedible parts like shells, drying, crushing, roasting, freezing, pasteurizing. These are all things that are done to foods to make them safe to consume. And in this case, I would suggest that we shouldn't hesitate to include these minimally processed foods in our diets. But this is still kind of confusing. How do we know if something is minimally processed or ultra-processed? Well, this is where there are 2 simple common sense tests that you can do very quickly to decide whether you're comfortable including a particular food in your diet. Firstly, does the food look more or less the way it did when it came off the tree or out of the ground? Very likely, the closer the way a food looks to the way it grew naturally, the healthier and less processed it will be. So for instance, when you walk through the produce section, you might see whole potatoes, apples, apricots, heads of lettuce. These all look pretty much exactly the way they did when they were growing, because they're really healthy and they've not been processed. Compare that to something like potato chips, crisps, or apple juice. These don't really look like the actual food because they've been processed quite heavily. And taken to the extreme, something like a cake doesn't resemble anything natural because there's nothing natural in it. So that's our first test. How does it visually look? Our second test is, has any good nutrition been stripped out of the food, Or has anything bad being added into it? And when I say bad, I mean something that's energy rich, it's very high in calories, but nutrient poor. There isn't that much nutrition in it. So things like sugar, fats like oils or butter, processed starches like white flour, or excessive salt. So a good example here would be different types of bread. In whole wheat bread, the entirety of the wheat grain has been used to make the bread. But in white bread, the flour has been processed and a load of that fibre, that health-promoting fibre, has been taken away and discarded. So you're getting nutritionally shortchanged with white bread because you're not getting all of the goodness of the wheat. Going back to our potato chips example, here we can see that it's not just potato. There's a load of fat from the cooking oil being added and a load of salt being added. So they didn't come from the potato originally. That's a lot of bad stuff that's been added into the potato chips. But let's take a different example. Let's say a can of cooked black beans or chickpeas. So these have undoubtedly been processed. They've come in a can. But has anything bad been added? Quite possibly not. Has anything good been taken away? No, they've just been cooked. So these, I would say, are an example of a minimally processed food that we should not hesitate to eat. So these two questions, how does it look, and has good stuff been taken away or bad stuff been added? These questions are a really simple, intuitive, helpful way of doing a quick analysis of whether you want to be including a food as part of a healthy diet. So after learning more about ultra-processed foods and their consequences, Sarah comes to reflect on the often unconscious role that food has been playing in her family's life. She decides that good food has to become a bigger priority. She understands that what her and her family eat on any given day doesn't really matter, but the broad pattern of what they eat day after day is going to determine their health destiny. Sarah decides that whilst convenience is undoubtedly important, she needs to find a better balance between her hectic life and providing wholesome meals for herself and her family. She realizes that even on her busiest days, there are ways that she can make simple, nourishing meals for her family without relying on ultra-processed foods. Over time, Sarah begins to prioritize meal planning and cooking as a way to bond with her children and teach the importance of a balanced diet. And she actually discovers that involving her kids in cooking and meal prep at home is actually a really fun, educational experience for everyone. And whilst the memory of years of ultra-processed ready meals might linger for Sarah, she realizes that it's never too late to make healthier choices, even in the midst of life's chaos. Today, Sarah and her family still eat ultra-processed meals occasionally. It's hard to exist in today's world without having a little from time to time. But she makes sure that she prioritizes healthy, unprocessed, plant-based meals most of the time. She knows that this common sense approach will be the best way that she can look after herself and her family for the long term. So friend, have you learned something here? How do you see your relationship with processed foods changing moving forwards? Let me know in the comments below. I'd be really interested to know. I want to have a bit of a discussion here because this is still something that I'm learning about. So tell me what you think about how you can see ultra-processed foods fitting into your life going forwards. I'd like to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.